This isn't a movie script. This is the story of what happened at St. Jude's Presbyterian, one of the most exclusive hospitals in New York City. The woman you see is Elena Vance, 34 weeks pregnant, and wife of Julian Thorne, heir to the Thorne global empire. The shadow belonged to Seraphina Dubois, his mistress. What happened next in that 10,000-a-night maternity suite wasn't just an argument. It was an attack that left a baby fighting for his life. But the real story is the revenge. A revenge so cold and public, orchestrated by the baby's billionaire grandfather, Marcus Thorne, that it didn't just make the news, it rocked the entire city. The celestial suite at St. Jude's Presbyterian floated 22 stories above the noise of Manhattan, a sterile, silent cloud of beige and muted blues. It was designed to feel like a 5-star hotel, not a high-risk antepartum unit, but the faint, chemical smell of antiseptic and the persistent, steady beep, beep, beep of the fetal heart monitor betrayed the illusion. Elena Vance, soon to be Elena Thorne, she kept reminding herself, though the wedding had been a quiet City Hall affair, shifted uncomfortably on the fret linens. At 34 weeks, she felt less like a person and more like a vessel, and a fragile one at that. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman with a spine of steel and kind eyes, had diagnosed her with severe preeclampsia 2 days ago. "Bed rest, zero stress, and constant monitoring, Elena," she had ordered. "We need to keep that blood pressure down and get this baby to at least 36 weeks. Zero stress was a bitter joke. Her husband, Julian Thorne, sat in a leather armchair by the window, not looking at the view, but at his phone. His dark, handsome face, the one that graced the covers of Forbes and Vanity Fair alongside his father, was tight with an annoyance he was failing to hide. "Julian?" Elena's voice was soft, hesitant. He didn't look up. His thumb was flying across the screen. Dr. Reed said the pressure was a little better this morning. Maybe you should go home. Get some real sleep. You look exhausted." "I'm fine, Elena. Just a situation at the office." The phone buzzed again, an insistent, angry vibration against the marble-side table. He'd forgotten to mute it. Elena didn't mean to look, but the name flashed on the screen in a stark, sans-serif font. Seraphina. Elena's blood, which she was trying so hard to keep calm, went cold, then hot. The monitor beside her bed reflected the surge, its rhythm accelerating. Beep, 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 beep. "Julian, who is that?" He snatched the phone. "I told you, it's the office. Seraphina Dubois. She's on the Paris acquisition team. She's difficult." He lied. He lied so easily. Elena knew exactly who Seraphina Dubois was. She wasn't just on the Paris team. She was a Parisian socialite, a model-turned-executive whose face was plastered across gossip sites, often next to Julian's at some gala or club opening Elena had been too tired to attend. The difficult situation had been going on for 6 months. "Julian, please," Elena whispered, a tear she tracked down her temple. "Not now. Please, I can't." The monitor shrieked. A nurse, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, bustled in. "Mrs. Vance, your pressure just spiked to 170 over 110. What's going on in here?" She glared at Julian. Julian stood up, running a hand through his perfect hair. He looked trapped. I wasn't doing anything. She's just emotional." "I need you to leave, Mr. Thorne," the nurse said, her voice flat. "Now. You are a stressor." Julian's face flushed with indignation, the Thorne heir, being dismissed by a nurse. But before he could argue, his phone buzzed again. He shot a look at Eleanor, a mixture of guilt and, terrifyingly, resentment. "Fine, I have to go anyway. There's an emergency at the Apex Tower. A server's down. A major one? He leaned down, gave Elena a dry, automatic kiss on the forehead, and was gone. Elena was left with the nurse, the sound of the monitor, and the cold, terrifying certainty that her husband had just lied to go to his mistress. Nurse Patricia clucked her tongue, adjusting the magnesium drip. Men, she muttered. They think emergency means a server. They have no idea. Elena closed her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to calm her own body for the sake of the tiny, innocent life hiccuping inside her. She focused on the steady beep, 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 trying to will it to slow down. An hour passed. The magnesium made her feel foggy and weak, her limbs heavy. Nurse Patricia had dimmed the lights and drawn the curtains, leaving Elena in a hazy twilight. The security guard hired by her father-in-law, Marcus Thorne, a man she had only met 5 times, each time a terrifyingly polite affair, was posted outside her door. She was safe. She was in a hospital. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, the door to her suite clicked open, then shut with a soft, expensive thud. "Patricia," Elena mumbled, her eyes heavy. "Is it time for my blood pressure check?" "No, darling." The voice was not Patricia's. It was light, melodic, with a rolling French accent that dripped with perfume. Elena's eyes snapped open. Standing at the foot of her bed, bathed in the glow of the monitoring equipment, was Seraphina Dubois. She was stunning. Raven black hair, blood-red lips, and a physique that looked sculpted from marble. She was wearing a black Chanel trench coat, as if she'd just stepped out of a fashion shoot, not into a hospital room. The smell of her perfume, fracas, was so strong it was suffocating. What are you doing here?" Elena fumbled for the nurse's call button. "Get out! Security!" Seraphina laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, they're busy. Frank, your guard, a little staged commotion down the hall, a few $1,000. It's amazing how distractible people are." She took a step closer, her eyes dark and predatory, scanning Elena from head to toe. They landed on the pronounced swell of her stomach. "So this is it," Seraphina said, her voice losing its melodic quality and turning flat, ugly. "This is the little parasite you're using to trap him." "Get out," Elena repeated, her voice shaking. She found the call button and jammed her thumb onto it. "He doesn't love you, you know," Seraphina continued, walking casually to the window, peering out at the city. "He finds you boring, pathetic, a safe choice." She turned back, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "He told me that last night, when he was in my bed. You're lying." But the denial was weak, hollow. "Am I?" Seraphina took another step, her smile widening. "Julian and I, we are equals. We are about passion and power. You are a chore, a duty. And this thing," she gestured to Eleanor's belly, "is just a complication, an anchor. And I'm here to cut the rope." "The nurses are coming," Eleanor said, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs would break. The monitor was screaming a solid, high-pitched teet. "They'll be too late," Seraphina whispered. She was right beside the bed now, her face just inches from Eleanor's. The smell of her perfume was nauseating. "He's only with you because of that baby," she hissed. "Let's see how much he wants you when it's gone." Before Elena could even process the words, Seraphina acted. It wasn't a punch, it was something more calculated. She grabbed the heavy-duty IV pole, the one holding the magnesium drip and the saline, and with a guttural cry of "You will not take him from me," she rammed it, hard, into the side of Eleanor's bed. The impact was brutal, but Seraphina wasn't done. She yanked it back and swung again, this time aiming lower, directly at Elena's stomach. Elena screamed, twisting, curling into a fetal position to protect her child. The metal bar slammed into her side, missing her belly by inches, but connecting with her ribs with a sickening crack. But the motion was enough. The sudden, violent twist sent a lance of white-hot agony through her abdomen. It was a pain so total, so blinding, that it eclipsed everything else. It felt like she was being torn in two from the inside out. She looked down. Between her legs, the white fret linens were blooming with a stain of a horrifying, impossible, arterial red. The door to the suite burst open. Nurse Patricia was there, flanked by 2 security guards, the ones who were supposed to be outside. They saw Serafina, who was poised to strike again, her face a mask of primal rage. They saw Elena clutching her stomach. They saw the blood. "Code Omega! Code Omega! Get Dr. Reed! Get her in here, now!" Patricia bellowed, tackling Serafina at the waist. Elena's world dissolved into a pinprick of sound. The last thing she heard before the blackness took her was Serafina, struggling against the guards, still screaming, "He's mine! Do you hear me? He's mine!" The hallway outside the celestial suite erupted. Code Omega was St. Jude's internal signal for a catastrophic obstetric emergency, a placental abruption, a uterine rupture, an event that meant mother and baby had, at best, minutes. Dr. Evelyn Reed was halfway down the hall when the call came, her heart leaping into her throat. She sprinted, her sensible shoes squeaking on the polished floor, bursting into the room to a scene of nightmarish chaos. Nurse Patricia and a guard were pinning a hysterical, beautifully dressed woman against the wall. But Dr. Reed only had eyes for the bed. Elena was unconscious, her face a pale, waxy mask, and the blood. There was so much blood. The fetal monitor was emitting a long, flat, single tone. The baby's heart had stopped. Abruption, full abruption. "Get her to OR 3, now!" Dr. Reed yelled, hitting the button on the bed to unlock the wheels. "Get me ONEG, 10 units. And page Dr. Hassan. Get the NICU team on standby. Tell them it's a crash and grab, no heartbeat." They were moving, a phalanx of blue scrubs rolling the bed at a run, down the hall, into the high-speed service elevator. Dr. Reed was on the bed with Elena, her hand jammed deep into Elena's abdomen, trying to find the baby, trying to push its head away from the hemorrhaging placenta, a futile, desperate act. Julian Thorne arrived just as they were slamming through the double doors to the surgical wing. He'd been in the parking garage, his argument with Serafina on the phone. "What do you mean you're at the hospital?" Cut short by the hospital's frantic page. "What's happening? Elena!" he shouted. Dr. Reed didn't even look at him. "Your wife is hemorrhaging, and your baby is dying, Mr. Thorne. Get out of my way." The door swung shut, leaving Julian alone in the hallway, the smell of his wife's blood and Serafina's perfume commingling in his senses. He leaned against the wall, his head spinning. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was just a fight. She was just going to talk to her. Inside OR 3, it was a race against the clock. Scalpel. Dr. Reed didn't wait for the anesthesia to fully take. This was a slash C-section, brutal and necessary. She made a single vertical incision, cutting through skin, fat, and fascia. Blood welled up instantly, dark and thick. Suction. More suction. "She's bleeding out. I can't see." A nurse was bagging Eleanor, forcing air into her lungs. Another was pushing blood products into a high-flow infuser. "I'm in," Dr. Reed said, her hands diving into the uterine cavity. The placenta had torn completely away from the uterine wall. It was a total abruption. She pushed it aside, and her fingers brushed a tiny, still foot. She pulled. At 7:14 p.m., exactly 8 minutes after the Code Omega was called, Leo Vance Thorne was born. He was silent, and he was blue. Not the healthy, screaming pink of a newborn, but a pale, translucent, horrifying blue. He was limp, lifeless. "No Apgar, no respiration. Start the clock," Dr. Reed said, her voice grim as she cut the cord and handed the tiny 2-pound body to the waiting NICU team. They whisked him away to an adjoining resuscitation bay without a word, a grim, practiced ballet. Dr. Reed turned her full attention back to Eleanor. The uterus, now empty, was failing to contract. It was a boggy, useless muscle, hemorrhaging from the spot where the placenta had ripped free. "She's in DIC," the anesthesiologist said, his voice tense. "Her blood isn't clotting. At all." "More FFP! More platelets!" Dr. Reed yelled, her hands deep inside her patient, manually massaging the uterus, trying to force it to clamp down. "Come on, Elena. Don't do this." For 20 minutes they fought. They pumped 18 units of blood and plasma into Elena, nearly twice her body's total volume. Finally, with a Barclay balloon and a web of desperate, frantic sutures, the bleeding slowed. Then, finally, it stopped. "She's stable," Dr. Reed breathed, stepping back, her blue scrubs soaked through with a blood that was not her own. "But she's not out of the woods. Move her to the surgical ICU, 1-to-1 nursing, and God help us when she wakes up." Julian was in a private waiting room, the kind reserved for people who donated buildings. He had been mechanically drinking bitter coffee from a styrofoam cup for 2 hours when Dr. Reed entered. She had changed her scrubs, but her face was etched with exhaustion, and her hair was matted with sweat. "Dr. Reed, my wife, my son." Dr. Reed sat down, her posture rigid. She did not sugarcoat. "Elena is alive. She's in the SICU. She lost a catastrophic amount of blood and sustained 2 broken ribs. We had to perform an emergency C-section and, later, a hysterectomy to save her life. She will never be able to carry another child." Julian processed the words. Hysterectomy. No more children. No more heirs. A flash of inconvenience passed through his mind, and he hated himself for it. "And the baby?" he whispered. "We resuscitated him. His name is Leo, according to the chart you both filled out." "Leo?" "Yes, is he?" "He was without oxygen for at least 6 minutes, Mr. Thorne. 6 minutes. His APGAR score was 0 at 1 minute and 2 at 5 minutes. He's in the NICU on a cooling blanket, which we hope will minimize the brain damage. He is suffering from severe hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. He is intubated, and he is having seizures. To be perfectly, brutally clear, your son may not survive the night, and if he does, he will likely be severely compromised. Severely compromised." The words hung in the sterile air. Julian's carefully constructed world, the wife, the heir, the mistress, had just been obliterated. This was Serafina's fault. This was all her fault. Before he could even formulate a response, the door to the waiting room opened. It wasn't a doctor. It was Marcus Thorne. He was not a tall man, but he filled the room, sucking all the oxygen out of it. He was in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a dark Tom Ford suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. He looked as though he had just stepped out of a board meeting, not rushed to a hospital. His eyes, a pale, icy blue, were his most famous feature. They were currently fixed on his son. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, radiating a cold, nuclear fury. "Father," Julian said, his voice cracking. He stood up. A son called before the headmaster. It's terrible. Elena. The baby." Marcus raised one hand, and Julian stopped talking, mid-sentence. "I have spoken to Dr. Reed," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, preternaturally calm. "I have spoken to the head of hospital security, and I have seen the preliminary police report. They are holding a woman named Serafina Dubois." Julian flinched, a small, guilty movement. Marcus saw it. His eyes narrowed. I see. Father, I swear I had no idea she would. I told her it was over. She was hysterical. I came here as soon as— You will be silent, Marcus said. It wasn't a request. You will not speak to the police. You will not speak to the hospital staff. You will not go near Elena's room. You will not go near the NICU. You will go to the penthouse, and you will wait for me. But Elena— My son. You have no son, Marcus said, the words so cold they burned. Not until I say you do. You have a wife you betrayed and a child you allowed to be attacked. You are a liability, Julian. And I will now proceed to manage that liability. Marcus turned and walked out of the room. He didn't check on his son. He didn't ask to see his daughter-in-law. He pulled out his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Benjamin Carter, the head of litigation for Thorn Global, a shark in a $5,000 suit. Benjamin, get to St. Jude's. I want a perimeter. No one talks to the press. No one. And I want the best private prosecutor you can find. I want this woman, Dubois, charged with attempted murder of my grandson. My grandson. Are we clear? The second call was to a man named Silas. Silas didn't have a last name, or at least not one that Marcus ever used. He was the head of Marcus's private security, a team of ex-Mossad and ex-MI6 agents who handled problems Thorn Global couldn't put on paper. Silas, Marcus said, stepping into his waiting Bentley. I have a situation. A woman named Serafina Dubois. I don't want to know what she had for breakfast. I want to know everything. I want to know her mother's maiden name, her first pet, every bank account, every text message, every secret she has ever had. I want her life taken apart, piece by piece, by morning. And I want the same done for my son. The driver shut the door, and the car pulled silently away into the night, leaving Julian Thorn alone in the fluorescent-lit hallway, a ghost in his own tragedy. Serafina Dubois sat in a cold, white interrogation room at the 19th precinct. The Chanel coat was gone, replaced by paper scrubs. The handcuffs had chafed her wrists. Her makeup was a tear-streaked ruin. Detective Maria Sanchez, a 20-year veteran who had seen everything, slid a cup of lukewarm coffee across the table. My lawyer, Serafina said, her voice hoarse. I'm not saying anything until I see Rick Kaplan. Rick Kaplan was a high-priced celebrity lawyer, known for getting actors out of DUIs. He's on his way, sweetheart, Sanchez said, leaning back. But you might want to talk to me first, because right now you're looking at aggravated assault, reckless endangerment. And if that baby dies and he's circling the drain, you're looking at murder too, maybe murder 1, since you planned it. It was a crime of passion, Serafina shrieked, the facade cracking. He loves me. She's the one who trapped him. She's a gold digger. I just snapped. Sanchez just stared. You snapped. You snapped, right past hospital security, into a secure maternity ward, and beat a pregnant woman with an IV pole. Save it for the jury. While Serafina was spinning her scorned woman narrative, Silas was 30 floors up in a secure data center at the Thorn Global Apex Tower. He and his team were not detectives. They were digital executioners. They didn't need warrants. By 3 a.m., they had Serafina's entire life on a dozen screens. By 4 a.m., Silas was standing in Marcus Thorn's penthouse study. The room was dark, save for a single lamp on the desk. Julian was nowhere to be seen, likely banished to a guest room. Marcus was sipping a Macallan 25, his face unreadable. Report, Marcus said. Silas placed a slim tablet on the desk. She is not who she appears to be, sir. I gathered. Her name is not Serafina Dubois. That's an identity she fabricated 5 years ago. built on a distant cousin's name. Her real name is Sophie Durocher. Marcus's hand, the one holding the whiskey, paused. He knew that name. Durocher. Jean-Pierre Durocher. His daughter, Silas confirmed. 20 years ago, Jean-Pierre Durocher had been the head of Thorn Global's European operations in Paris. He had been Marcus's right-hand man until Marcus discovered he had been running a shadow ledger, siphoning millions into a private account. Marcus hadn't just fired him. He'd had him prosecuted, bankrupted, and utterly destroyed. Durocher had died of a heart attack a year later, penniless and in disgrace. She was 15, Silas continued, swiping on the tablet. She and her mother were left with nothing. She's been planning this for years. Planning what? Marcus asked, his voice now a razor's edge. To seduce my idiotic son. That was just the entry point, sir. This wasn't about love. It was about revenge. For the last 6 months, Serafina has been feeding proprietary data from Julian's laptop to a competitor. Silas swiped again. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Harrison Ventures, Marcus breathed. His mortal enemy, a rival firm run by a vulture capitalist named Daniel Harrison. He's been trying for a hostile takeover for a decade. She didn't just leak data, sir. She fed them our sealed bids for the new offshore wind contracts. She gave them our entire Q4 projection model. She's been poisoning the well, preparing for a short cell attack coordinated with Harrison. And Julian? He was a fool, sir, completely blinded. He gave her his top-level access codes. He put her on the Paris acquisition team himself, against HR's advice, so she could have access to the data rooms. So the attack on Eleanor wasn't just a fit of jealous rage, it was a calculation. Go on, Marcus said. We cross-referenced the server pings, the emergency at the tower tonight, the one that pulled Julian from the hospital. It was a fabrication. The alert was triggered from outside the system, using an algorithm that traced back to a shell corporation. A corporation owned by Sophie Durocher. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city he owned. He was silent for a full minute. Serafina. Sophie hadn't just snapped. She had intentionally lured Julian away from the hospital. She knew about Elena's high-risk status. Julian had complained about it to her. She went to that room, knowing an attack could trigger a medical crisis. It was an attempt to destabilize the family at the exact same time she was destabilizing the company. A two-pronged attack, a daughter's revenge. And what? Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly soft. Did you find on my son? Silas hesitated. Sir, the bank records are conclusive. He hasn't just been sleeping with her. He's been funding her. He gave her the $5 million she used to seed the Shell Corporation. He bought the apartment she lives in. He was, wittingly or not, an active participant in the espionage against your own company. Marcus Thorne stared at the lights of New York. He had built an empire, but the call was coming from inside the house. His own son, his blood, had brought this serpent into his home and handed her the knife. Silas, Marcus said, turning from the window, his face a mask of cold granite. Lock her down. Alert Mr. Carter. I want him to file a civil suit so large it will blot out the sun. I want a lien on everything she's ever touched. As for the criminal case, tell Detective Sanchez I will be paying her a visit. I have some new evidence for her. And Mr. Julian? Silas asked. Marcus looked toward the hallway where his only son was sleeping. Mr. Julian is about to learn the difference between being a thorn and being my son. Julian was woken by a sharp knock. He stumbled out of the guest bed, his head pounding, his suit from the day before hopelessly wrinkled. He found his father in the grand library, a room panelled in dark mahogany, that always felt like a courtroom. Marcus was, as always, immaculate, already in a fresh suit and tie. The sun was just beginning to weakly light the sky over Central Park. "Father, I was going to go to the hospital." "Sit." Julian sat. On the polished mahogany table between them, Marcus laid out a series tam of documents, bank statements, server logs, corporate wire transfers. "Is Sophie Durocher a name that means anything to you, Julian?" Julian's confusion was, for a moment, genuine. "Who? No. What is this?" "It's the real name of the woman you know as Seraphina Dubois," Marcus said, his voice flat. "The daughter of Jean-Pierre Durocher, a man I sent to prison for fraud, a man who stole millions from this family." Julian's face went white. I didn't know. I swear." "Of course you didn't know." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, the first crack in his icy composure. "You were too busy thinking with the wrong part of your anatomy to do 1 second of due diligence. You brought a viper into my house, into my company." She loved me," Julian stammered, a pathetic defense. Marcus let out a short bark of a laugh. It was the most terrifying sound Julian had ever heard. "Loved you? You were a tool, Julian, a means to an end. This was never about you. It was about me. She was destroying this company from the inside, using your access, funded by your allowance." He slid a bank statement across the table. A $5 million transfer from Julian's personal trust to a Cayman Islands holding company. "For her new fashion line, I believe you told the bank? This company, Julian, is the same one that's been funding the short sell attack with Daniel Harrison." Julian looked at the paper, his hands shaking. He was finished. He wasn't just an adulterer. He was a fool, a traitor. She tricked me," he whispered, tears of self-pity welling. "Father, you have to believe me. I love this company. I would never— I'll fix it. I'll talk to Harrison. I'll— "You will do nothing," Marcus interrupted, "because as of 5 a.m. this morning, you are nothing." Marcus produced another document. This one, Julian recognized. It was the Thorn Global Bylaws. "I have just spoken to the board," Marcus said. "I invoked Article 7, Section 4, the morality clause, and the clause pertaining to actions gravely detrimental to the company. You have been unanimously voted off the board, effective immediately. Your employment is terminated. Your corporate accounts are frozen. The keys to your company car are to be left on this table." Julian stared, uncomprehending. My job, Father, you can't." "I can, I have." Marcus slid a third set of papers over. "These are from my personal attorney, Benjamin Carter. You are being removed as a beneficiary of the primary Thorn family trust. Your access to all family properties, including this one, is revoked. You have 1 hour to pack a bag. A car will take you to a hotel, one of your own choosing, and on your own dime. I suspect your personal Amex will be declined by lunch." This was it. This was the end. Not a fiery confrontation, but a cold, legal, systematic execution. "Father, please!" Julian fell to his knees. It was a grotesque, medieval gesture. "She attacked my wife. She attacked my son. I'm the victim here too." Marcus looked down at his kneeling son, and his face was not one of anger or even disappointment. It was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You are not a victim, Julian. You are a collaborator. You brought the enemy to the gates. Your wife? Elena. She is the victim. Your son, who is currently fighting for every breath in a plastic box, he is the victim. You are just a deep, profound, and expensive embarrassment." Marcus stood up, adjusting his cuffs. "You are no longer my son. You are just a man who shares my name." For now, I suggest you find a very good lawyer. You will need one." He walked out of the library, leaving Julian sobbing on the antique Persian rug, a billionaire reduced to a beggar in the space of 10 minutes. The news hit the city like a shockwave. New York Post, Thorne air iced, Wall Street. Journal, Julian Thorne, ousted from board amid personal scandal. TMZ, Thorne Mistress, charged with attempted murder. The narrative was chaotic. Serafina, now publicly identified as Sophie Durocher, was a jilted lover. Julian was a disgraced husband. Elena was the tragic wife. Leo was the miracle baby, still in critical condition in the NICU. But Marcus Thorne was just getting started. This was only the appetizer. In her cell at Rikers Island, Sophie Durocher was frantic. Her celebrity lawyer, Rick Kaplan, was in full spin mode. "My client is the real victim," he shouted on the courthouse steps. "She was manipulated by the Thorne family. She is being scapegoated to cover up Julian Thorne's own financial crimes. She was pregnant with his child, and when she confronted him, his wife attacked her." It was a bold, insane lie. But it muddied the waters. It introduced doubt. Marcus watched Kaplan's press conference on the TV in his office. He took a sip of tea. "He's good," he murmured to Benjamin Carter. "He's a cockroach," Carter replied. "Sir, they've filed a civil suit against us for $100 million. Defamation, emotional distress, and they're subpoenaing Julian." "Excellent," Marcus said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Sir, this is what I wanted. She's cornered, and a cornered animal is predictable. She's overplaying her hand. She thinks this is a public relations battle. She doesn't realize this is a war she has already lost." Marcus's plan was not to win in court. That would take years. That was private. He wanted a public execution. "The heart of the city gala," Marcus said, looking at his calendar. "It's in 3 weeks, at the Met." "We should cancel it, sir," Carter advised. "The optics—" "We are not cancelling it. We are moving it up to next Tuesday. And you are going to make sure that Sophie Durocher's legal team receives a leak." "A leak of what?" "Financial documents from Thorne Global. Documents that seemed to prove Julian was the one embezzling and that he was wiring the money to an offshore account in Eleanor's name." Carter's eyes widened. "Sir, those are falsified. That's entrapment." "It's a trap," Marcus corrected. "Kaplan and Durocher are so eager to prove Julian is the bad guy, they won't vet them. They won't have time. They will see them as their silver bullet. They will, almost certainly, release them to the press to blow up our gala." "And when they do?" "When they do," Marcus said, his eyes glinting, "they will have committed a new crime, disseminating fraudulent corporate documents, and I will be on stage in front of the entire city when the truth comes out." This was the real revenge. Not just to jail her, not just to sue her, but to let her and the whole world think she was winning right before he pulled the scaffolding out from under her. He had one more stop to make. He went to the hospital, not the NICU. He couldn't bear to look at the tiny, fragile body of his grandson, covered in wires. He went to the surgical ICU. Elena was awake. She was pale, weak, and had a tube in her nose. But her eyes were clear, and they were furious. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a rasp. He sat beside her bed. He did not offer platitudes. "Elena, you have been wronged. By my son, and by that woman. My baby," she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. "They won't let me see my baby." "He is alive," Marcus said. "He is fighting, and I am fighting for him. For you." He leaned in. "Next Tuesday is the heart of the city gala. It is the most important night of the year for this company. The press will be there. The entire city will be watching. I am asking you to be there, by my side." Elena looked horrified. "Be there? I can't even... I'm broken." "You are not broken," Marcus said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You are forged. They see you as a victim, a tragic footnote. I want them to see you as the future. I am going to destroy the people who did this to you, Elena, and I want you to be there to watch them burn." A new light entered Elena's eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't kindness, it was steel, the same steel that lived in Marcus. "Get Dr. Reed," Elena said. "Tell her I need a wheelchair, and tell her I need the best dress in New York." The great hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a sea of black tie and diamonds. The heart of the City Gala, moved up with only a week's notice, was the only event that mattered in New York. The tension was palpable. The air crackled with gossip and the flash of 1,000 cameras. Where was Julian? Is the baby alive? Is Marcus Thorne's empire crumbling? Daniel Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Ventures, was there, holding court by the Temple of Denda, a smug look on his face. He thought he was at a funeral. Rick Kaplan and Sophie Durasher's legal team were also there, having been accidentally invited. They were clustered near the press pen, handing out packets of documents. The leak had worked. The New York Times and Wall Street Journal reporters were already looking at the bombshell documents, wires from Thorne Global, allegedly signed by Julian, to a shell company in Elena Vance's name. The narrative Kaplan was spinning was electric. This was a conspiracy between Marcus, Julian, and Elena all along. Sophie was the whistleblower, and they tried to silence her. The lights dimmed. Marcus Thorne walked onto the stage. A single spotlight hit him. The room fell silent. "Good evening," he said. "There has been a lot of speculation about my family, my company. Tonight I am here to provide clarity." He gestured to the side of the stage. A murmur went through the crowd as Eleanor Vance Thorne was wheeled out. She was in a wheelchair, yes, but she was not a victim. She was wearing a stunning, custom-made gown of ice blue silk. Her hair and makeup were flawless. She looked like an avenging queen, and her eyes were fixed on the crowd with terrifying resolve. She parked her chair right next to the podium. "My daughter-in-law, Elena," Marcus said, his voice ringing with pride. "The strongest woman I have ever known, and the mother of my grandson, Leo Thorne, who, I am happy to report, as of this morning, is breathing on his own." A wave of applause, genuine and relieved, swept the room. "But we are here tonight," Marcus continued, his voice hardening, "because of an act of profound evil, an act of personal and corporate terrorism." Rick Kaplan, in the back, scoffed, preparing his counter-move. "The press among you," Marcus said, "have just been handed documents by Mr. Rick Kaplan, documents that purport to show a conspiracy, that my daughter-in-law was somehow involved." Kaplan and his team smiled. This was it. "Let's put those documents up on the big screen, shall we?" Marcus said. The documents appeared on a massive screen above the stage. The wire transfers, the signatures. "They look very convincing," Marcus said. "Except they are complete and utter forgeries." Kaplan's smile vanished. "These are not Thorne Global documents," Marcus boomed. "They are fakes. Fakes created by my team and intentionally leaked to Sophie Durasher's legal counsel. Counsel who was so blinded by greed and so confident in their own lies, they disseminated fraudulent corporate documents to the press. An act which, my lawyers tell me, constitutes several felonies." The press pool looked at Kaplan, who was now the color of ash. "But that," Marcus said, "is just the opening act. You see, Ms. de Rocher, or Sophie, has based her entire defense on being a scorned lover who snapped. A crime of passion. Let's see, shall we? The screen changed. It was no longer documents. It was high-definition, color security footage. The world suddenly saw the inside of the celestial suite. The audio was crystal clear. Serafina, this is the little parasite you're using to trap him. Elena, get out, security. Serafina, he's only with you because of that baby. Let's see how much he wants you when it's gone. The room watched in horrified, pin-drop silence as the video showed Serafina grabbing the IV pole. It showed her ramming it into the bed. It showed her swinging at Eleanor's pregnant stomach. It showed the blood. A woman in the front row screamed. Several people burst into tears. Daniel Harrison looked like he was going to be sick. That, Marcus said, his voice a low growl, is not passion. That is premeditation. That is attempted murder. Sophie Durocher, who had been watching from a secure location with her team, was now on every screen, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. But why? Marcus continued. Why do this? Because this was never about my son. It was about me. The screen changed again. Now it showed the old, grainy photo of Jean-Pierre Durocher. It showed the 20-year-old articles about his fraud. This is Sophie Durocher, the daughter of a man who tried to steal from my company, and she was trying to finish the job. The screen filled with server logs, bank transfers from Sophie to Harrison Ventures, her entire plan laid bare. She conspired with a competitor, Marcus said, his eyes finding Daniel Harrison in the crowd. She committed corporate espionage, and when she feared she was being discovered, she tried to create a distraction. She tried to murder my grandson to cover her tracks. As he spoke, Detective Maria Sanchez and two uniformed officers who had been waiting in the wings walked directly to Rick Kaplan's table and slapped handcuffs on his wrists. Richard Kaplan, you're under arrest for conspiracy and disseminating fraudulent materials. At the same moment, across town, a separate team burst into the office where Sophie Durocher was hiding. She was arrested on the spot. Not just for the assault, but for a dozen new federal charges of corporate espionage and conspiracy. But Marcus wasn't finished. There was one last piece of business. He looked into the camera. He knew his son was watching. And finally, to the man who enabled this, my former son, Julian Thorne. The cameras flashed, a blinding strobe of light. He was a fool, a weak, negligent fool, who put this family and this company at grave risk. As of this morning, he has been formally and irrevocably disowned. His inheritance, his name, his position, all of it is gone. Marcus turned and took Elena's hand. He raised it in the air. The Thorne legacy is not built on weak men, he declared to the shocked room. It is built on strength. It is built on loyalty. And it is built on family. The future of Thorne Global and my entire personal fortune will be placed in a new trust. A trust for the real Thorne family, Elena Vance Thorne, and her son Leo. The city hadn't just been rocked, it had been fundamentally altered. The king had not just defended his castle, he had burned his enemies, disowned his own blood, and crowned a new queen, all before the main course was served. 6 months later, New York was a different city. The name Sophie Durocher was a punchline, a cautionary tale. Facing an avalanche of evidence, the video, the financial trail, the testimony of Daniel Harrison, who turned state's evidence to save his own company. She took a plea. 25 years to life. She would be an old woman before she ever saw the outside of a prison again. Julian Thorne was a ghost. He had tried to sue for his inheritance. The case was laughed out of court in a single afternoon. Marcus Thorne's lawyers had produced a mountain of evidence of his gross negligence. The Post ran a grainy photo of him, overweight, badly dressed, loading luggage into a taxi outside a budget motel in Delaware. He had tried to sell his story, but no one cared about the story of a weak man who had lost. Thorne Global, on the other hand, was thriving. The stock had soared after the purge. Marcus had proven his leadership was absolute, but the real change was at the hospital. St. Jude's now featured the Leo Thorne Vance NICU, a state-of-the-art facility funded by a $100 million donation from the New Thorne Trust. Leo himself was a miracle. The cooling therapy and the relentless work of his doctors had worked. He was small, and he would need years of physical therapy, but he was whole. He had minimal brain damage. He was, as Dr. Reed called him, a little fighter. Elena Vance Thorne was no longer in a wheelchair. She walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of her broken ribs, but she walked with purpose. She was not the grieving wife. The city's society pages had a new name for her: the matriarch. She had not retreated into motherhood. She had advanced. She sat on the Thorne Global Board, not as a token, but as an active member. The old men who had initially dismissed her as the widow now feared her. She had her father-in-law's eye for numbers and a cold, analytical mind that her ex-husband had always lacked. She was also the full-time head of the Thorne Charitable Foundation, redirecting its mission to fund women's shelters and legal aid for victims of domestic violence. The final scene of the story took place not at a gala, but on the penthouse terrace, high above the city. It was a warm summer evening. Marcus Thorne, the city's apex predator, was on his hands and knees on an expensive rug, making airplane noises as his grandson Leo giggled and pulled on his ear. Elena watched them, a small, genuine smile on her face. She had divorced Julian and had legally taken back her maiden name, adding Thorne's only as a doing business as. She was Elena Vance. "You know," she said, sipping a glass of water, "the press still can't believe what you did, disowning your only son. It was Shakespearean." Marcus looked up, his face softer than the world ever saw it. He picked up Leo, holding the boy close. "Shakespeare was full of tragedy," Marcus said, looking at his grandson. This was a correction. Julian was a mistake, a weak link." He looked at Elena, his eyes full of a new, profound respect. "The Thorne name isn't just about blood, Elena. It's about character. You and this boy. You are the character. You are the legacy." Elena nodded, turning to look out over her city. She had survived the fire. She had lost a husband, her fertility, and her illusions, but she had gained a son. She had gained an empire, and she had learned, from the most ruthless teacher in the world, exactly how to protect it. And so, the city of New York learned a valuable lesson. You do not touch what belongs to Marcus Thorne. Sophie Durocher, the mastermind, is rotting in a cell. Julian Thorne, the fool, is a forgotten man. And Eleanor Vance, the victim, is now one of the most powerful women in the city, protecting her son and the empire she inherited. This story is a brutal reminder that the line between love and obsession and between business and revenge is terrifyingly thin. It wasn't just a family drama. It was a public execution, a demonstration of power so total it left the entire city speechless. What do you think? Was Marcus's revenge justified, or was it a cold-hearted overreaction? What part of this story shocked you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us bring more incredible stories like this to light. And if you love stories of drama, revenge, and justice, make sure to hit that like button. share this video with someone who won't believe it, and most importantly, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an update.